This is a story about a man, about a pub, about a pint, about a fruit machine, and about a whole load of rubbish, right? And it's a story that if you gamble, if you've gambled in the past, if you've ever been around gambling, or even if you've been around a pub and you like a pint, this is a story that I'm sure you've heard repeated time after time after time. And I want to draw attention to it, firstly, for comedic value, but secondly, because actually I do think there is an underlying issue here, an underlying moral, if you will. But we'll try and keep it upbeat to start with. But before I do, right, before I regale you with tales of absolute bullshit, I want to say, hope you're keeping safe. I hope you're keeping sane. I hope you're all doing well. If you do like this channel, if you do watch the videos, if you do want to support me, there'll be a link to the Patreon in the description below. Don't expect too much from it. It's just your way of saying, cheers one. Nice one, mate. Thanks for the videos. But if you don't want to support me in that way, that's absolutely cool. Just like the video, subscribe, and do all that great YouTubery stuff. So, what happened? Well, you might find this a bit hard to believe. I went to the pub. Yes, I went to the pub after work. I think it was one day a couple of weeks ago. And I did my normal pub thing. And by that, I mean I sat down with a pint and chatted nonsense to the people at the table. I noticed a guy come in. I'm sure I've seen him before, but I didn't really know him. And he had a pint and he went straight on the fruit machine. Now, when I say fruit machine, I don't mean fruit machines as we all grew up with 3 reels and holds and nudges and all that sort of nonsense. I mean fruit machines as if they are now miniature casino machines, fob tees, pokies if you're not from this great isle. But basically ones where the entire level of your interaction with the game is to do that and push start button and hope for the best. Or if you are indeed too lazy to do that, and that's far too much like strenuous exercise, you can put the autoplay on and just stand back and watch your balance slowly diminish. One of those ones. And he selected this game, doesn't really matter, not saying it before, but whatever. And I saw him put 50 quid in because, in spite of my recovery and in spite of the many ways in which my mindset has changed around gambling, I am still drawn to it when I see someone else gamble. I still can't help but at least keep a little half a crafty eye on what's going on the other side of the room, right? Because I don't think this is something you ever lose. Maybe some people have. Maybe some people are now completely, totally disinterested in this. But I think the majority of us know that feeling, you know. So you just keep a little crafty eye, see how they're getting on, you know, and waiting for that nice Schadenfreude moment when they lose. Maybe that's just me. Maybe I'm just an arsehole. Who knows? Anyway, so I saw this guy put 50 quid in. Oh, cracking on, talking rubbish, drinking beer, playing darts, doing all this sort of stuff. And I look over and he got jackpot, 100 quid. That's all it is in this country, £100. And so I thought, well, happy days, good luck for him, blah, 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 all the rest of it. Okay. And then I sort of, he kept playing and I looked over again and he had 200 quid and I was like, happy days, you know, £300. I'm like, what's going on here then? And then I was sat there for a bit longer, ordered another pint in, chatted some more nonsense, might have even got some pork scratchings. Who loves a cliche, right? And I look over and he's got £400 in the bank now, and apparently that's now all these machines allow you to bank, and so every other win he got, it paid out. So I looked over after a set period of time, or however long it had been, however many hours had drifted by, and there was this bloke. He had £400 in the balance from his original 50 quid. He had a tray full of coins and a big smile on his face. And by this stage he'd gathered a bit of a crowd of regulars, and I could hear him regaling them with stories and, you know, instructions and how he'd managed to achieve this amazing accomplishment of making 400 odd quid, right? And he was telling them, yes, you need to do this and you need to play this, and on these wins you gamble on this red or black, and you do this and you do that and you do the other, and you hold the bars and you nudge your melons, and he didn't say the last two things, but you know, all those cliches, right? He had a strategy, he had a method, he had a way of which to guarantee that he could turn this 50 quid into this 400 plus every time. He was a legend of the boozer, all right? He was the same as the guy that everyone who's got a mate who's put, one credit in a club machine and won 250 quid, right? We all know those stories. Every pub's got them. Every man who goes in a pub regularly has got a story like that, all right? But this guy was now a living legend, the man who turned 50 quid into 400 plus, and he bought everyone a drink, and he was being heralded as this machine legend, this, you know, pioneer of beating the bandits. Anyway, this went on for a little while. There's a little bit, enough time to make me slightly nauseous. And then just before he left, he thought we'd have a little casual go on the other machine, which actually, ironically, was absolutely identical to the first machine because, let's face it, variety doesn't exist anymore. So he played the same game, and he did the same method. His faultless, flawless, totally 100% guaranteed gambling method on this particular game that was going to net him another few £100, make him even more famous in the pub, elevate his status as gambling legend amongst the locals. Fast forward a couple of pints for me, and an hour or so later, and he went to the bar to get some cash back. He'd lost everything he'd won on that previous machine, plus obviously, presumably, everything else he had in his wallet, and he was determined to continue playing. He got some cash back, he lost that, and then he wandered out via the smoking entrance without a trace. Didn't say goodbye to anyone, didn't mention it, didn't talk about his losses, just slinked off into the night with empty pockets and possibly a little bit of a broken heart. So yes, whilst this is a cliche, and whilst we all have these people with gambling stories that regale them to us time after time whenever we go to a pub or somewhere similar, there is a story here. There's a lesson, I presume, in some respects, and it's not just that people talk bullshit in pubs, because I don't think that really needs a video, does it? Sometimes as gamblers we make up strategies, we make up systems in our mind, we make up sometimes beliefs, superstitions, and all these sorts of things. You push this button at a certain time, you only ever gamble on hearts or black or the number 7 or whatever it is. When you get a win, you only ever gamble wins of X amount or above, or you do this and you do that and you do that in the same order, and you push the button gently and you look away when you repeat, and you only ever pick the right hand pot. All these things, right, that we decide have such a significant impact on our ability to win from predetermined or random games. Ultimately, they don't. Since the death of the old school fruit machine, you have precisely zero control over what happens on the vast majority of forms of gambling these days. But the invention of these superstitions, the invention of these so-called perceived methods, is a dangerous one. It allowed us not only the ability to believe that we can beat a machine, and whether we do truly believe that or it's some sort of belief that we hold on to, it's also an excuse to perpetuate a very dangerous behaviour. If we can build up in our minds the idea that we have a strategic advantage, if we think we have a method, if we think we have a strategy, then we can justify continuing to gamble well beyond our means, because, well, we know what we're doing. The money that we are losing in the early stages is going to come back. We see it all the time, people selling roulette systems, people selling slot systems, gambling systems of all these types. Now, not only this is a con, because it's taking money from people for basically snake oil, it's also taking money from people who are possibly gambling addicts and vulnerable financially in the first place. But it's buying a false sense of security that if you stick to this pattern, if you do this thing time after time after time, then you will be successful. You will beat the machine, you will beat the game, you will come out the victor. And maybe this system had worked for this particular gentleman before. Maybe he had won previously doing what he'd been doing. But he learned a very harsh lesson that day, that as quickly as money can be won, it can be lost, and then more so. And we know this as gamblers. So don't hang on to any belief that you have a system, or that anything you do has any impact over the game itself. All right. If you are truly a professional gambler and you do have a strategic advantage on whatever method of gambling that is, then you won't be there shouting about it to random strangers in the pub. You will be keeping it very, very firmly under your hat. Okay. In the meantime, if you want to play with a certain strategy, then fine. If you pick certain numbers on roulette because they're your numbers, fine. If you like to play certain games in your way, then fine. But please, please, please be aware, okay, that this is not a justification to continue gambling beyond your means. This guy found out the hard way, and I'm sure he certainly isn't alone. The belief that we have any more control than the next man over certain games is merely your gambling addict brain telling you to keep gambling, to keep feeding the urge, to feed the addiction, and ultimately make things worse. I hope you all stay safe, you stay sane. Like I say, if you wish to support the channel through the Patreon link below, it's very, very much appreciated. It helps me to build the channel, do a lot of the things I've spoken about before. But just a like, subscribe, and if you want to leave a comment, that's great. That helps endlessly as well. So yeah, any support you can lend in any way is massively appreciated. Until then, Stay safe, stay sane, and I shall see you all on the next video. Take care, everyone.